Where's Mel when you need him? Come on.
Yeah. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Comics and Coffee with Nico and Gary, or as I like to say, this is Gary's show.
Please. This is something, Nico, that I know we've spoken about. We've promised / threatened to do a morning show type format. I think now more than ever, this is
for adults that wake up in the morning.
Yeah, and we promise this is going to be a COVID-free show. We are not going to discuss you. There are plenty other places you can go for that. We want this to be your sort of morning zen. Bad news though, Nico. We may have to change the title for next week because there's already a Comics and Coffee podcast out there, and I know that you have some legal experience.
What if we call it? Yeah, I'll fucking defend any suit. I don't care. But what if we call it instead of Coffee and Comics, we'll call it Comics and Coffee? It's sort of like McDonald's and McDowell's. They've got the golden arches. We've got the golden arch.
How about the do's and donuts of comic investing?
That's a good one.
I'm trying to think. The Specfist Club with Nico and Gary. We have a lot of opportunities out there. So we'll leave our commenters out there to determine that. I did bring, because I'm a big pie guy, so I brought breakfast pie, a little blueberry pie from Grand Traverse Pie Company delivering.
I'm not real healthy, so I'm eating M&Ms
that
I didn't finish eating last night that I saw at my bedside. I've got problems. Usually I will eat any food that I leave next to my bed all night long. It's kind of disgusting. So I barricaded this behind like a couple bottles of water so I couldn't reach it. And then I saw it in the morning and I was like, oh.
So essentially you're my 14-year-old son, essentially, Nico. So when I come in the morning and I see his mattress is on the floor under a bed, and I see all the snacks and food just tucked under on the other side of the mattress. So that's great.
I eat like a child. And, I'm very childlike. I try to be less and less childish. It doesn't work so well.
Yeah,
all right.
We have some great morning show banter going already.
Yeah.
This is very,
Tell people what we're here to talk about this week.
So this week, so our hopes are that every week we will be coming to you and bringing you a different topic. And we were talking about the Spider-Verse, we were talking about Star Wars, but we thought what better gateway book than to go through X-Men. X-Men has been hot again with Jonathan Hickman's revitalization of the brand. But there's a storied history there. We're not going to touch on those books that are the obvious ones. We're not going to talk about Uncanny 94. We're not going to talk about Nick's 3. We're going to talk about those books that may be off the radar. We're going to recommend some books that you can read just for the storyline, because now more than ever, people probably are looking for things to read. If you're not aware, obviously all of the new books have stopped coming out. If you're a Wednesday warrior, you know that already. So the industry is in some sort of dire straits right now. So we thought, what better time to pop in, look at books that we have in our collections. If you don't know what I do, I have a Comic Despective weekly podcast. It's been off the last 2 weeks because I've been guest or co-hosting other podcasts. And Nico does some amazing work with Comic Book Wars and also on the site Comic Book Speculation, where he writes an amazing weekly column. And it seems like we don't have a lot in common. Like I seem more like the high ratio variant guy and digging in some obscure stuff. And Nico is a very golden age centric guy. But we do have a love of mutant books, and he's going to dispel that notion here right now, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, you and I talk privately. Sure, we both, for whatever reason, kind of fit into those little boxes when it comes to our social media, for lack of a better description, personas. But we buy a lot of the same books, and we don't just buy one copy; we buy 10, or you know what I mean. We're pulling them out of those dollar bins or grabbing them for cover price, and I think that's what made me most interested in sitting down and trying to do this on a weekly basis, because sure, maybe we do some things uniquely different or whatever, but the vast majority, sort of the nuts and bolts, eggs and potatoes, bacon and sausage of our comic buying and selling is very much the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. So speaking of buying and selling, Nico, before we jump into X-Men, have you acquired anything? I know you were talking a little bit before the show started that you've sort of stopped buying everything at all. Have you gotten anything lately?
No, oh God, not really. Here's sort of the problem. I've got to figure out how to change my mailing address. I generally have books mailed to my dad's house. My mom's in a nursing home, but my dad's a senior citizen, obviously. I'm no spring chicken, and it gets me over to his house for a good excuse, multiple times a week. So that's where I always have books delivered. And in light of everything that's been going on, I've tried to communicate with him over the phone. So I just stopped abruptly, and I guess I'm gonna have to start having stuff delivered to my work. They're gonna hate me.
Yeah, when those packages start piling up at the door, Nico, and I think that's been the big thing, right? Like, postal workers are still out there delivering. There's so many places that have dried up. I know a lot of local comic shops are trying to put their stock online, but it's going to be a very difficult time. I know one thing that I've been doing. The only book that I bought, and I know you saw this book already. This is a book that I've been waiting to get. Right?
Oh yeah,
comic
makes me so happy.
But this is just like one of those, since I wasn't buying anything, I wasn't buying small books. My weekly Wednesday money was sort of out there. So I'm like, I've been waiting to get this book. This is sort of if you look at you can sort of see it's a beautiful copy of this book.
Yeah. Now, right? For those who are unfamiliar, who's the artist?
So this is Dave Stevens, who might be best known for his Rocketeer work, but he also did a lot of Good Girl art. I think
he's the king of Good Girl art, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is if you're gonna be looking for someone to chase books for, this is it. And this is one of his. I would say this is one of his most sought after covers. And I have a rule of yellow covers. There is no bad yellow cover, I think. And this might have been one of the early ones to set the precedent with that as well. So, and of course, you may recognize that Adam Hughes did the Dirty Pair homage variant to this as well, which is sought after. And
then there was another homage that, God, was it, who did it? Michael Turner, maybe? Yeah,
I'm trying to think. And again, I'm sure there's some even that we haven't even seen out there. You know what book it was for?
God, I'm trying to remember the name of the series that's going to drive me nuts. Was it a Danger Girl cover maybe?
He did something for JSC's Danger Girl back in the day. Yeah, we can check that out. I'm sure. We'll check it out.
Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. All right. Anyway.
And the other thing, if you're looking to support like comic artists during this time, like one thing I've been doing, and I know there have been some comic artists on Twitter and creators who are listing comic shops, and they've been doing this thing where they're doing 6 sketches, and they're doing fan art sketches, which is really cool. I actually Ben Caldwell, who I don't know if people know him, he does this. What's it called? Gosh, now I'm gonna forget. Dan Dare, maybe, or no, Dare Detectives. And this is something from Dare Detectives. It's called The 5 Fathoms, and he does these daily doodle sketches. I think they range for like $60, and he's been giving a lot to food pantries. He's been giving some to comic shops. So I'm looking how I can buy original art off of Twitter, help people out. Donnie Cates has been buying, he commissioned all this art, like $2,000 worth of art, and now he's going to auction it off and use it to help comic shops out. So even if you're not buying books, go on, look at some original art. That's my PSA for the day. And then
well, we've seen a lot of cool stuff. Frank Ogle's been real active on social media, trying to make an effort to help retailers. And as far as original art goes, Rob Gullery is dropping Chew OA. I should have put that announcement in my phone. I sent it to a bunch of people and then didn't calendar it, but that didn't already happen. It's something you should check out because
I only follow Layman. I don't follow Guillory. I follow Layman, the crazier one of the,
Yeah,
he's out of his mind. All right, so I thought we'd get in. We're gonna get into some X books today. I thought we'd go into a few things, maybe talk about some of the older books, first appearances that aren't maybe as well known, and what sort of sparked this was, if you recall, Nico and I did a show earlier, if you've watched us in the past. So I am a huge Kitty Pryde fan. If you look in the back over there, you see that Marvel Bashujo statue up there of Kitty Pryde. I know Nico is also a huge fan as well. So this book is probably best known because it's the first adult appearance of Madeline Pryor. But I just love it because Kitty Pryde on the cover, front and center. This is her when she's trapped in the mansion. Also known, this is the first time, it says Lockheed appearance, but I think this is the first time that Lockheed is actually named in this book as well. So this is, of course, Uncanny 168. And we know that Kitty made her first appearance in 129 along with Emma Frost and first cameo of the Hellfire Club. Those are books that are obviously sought after, books that you'd be looking for down the line. I think a book right now, another one to be seeking out, probably All New Wolverine 2. This is just the regular Bengal cover for this one. There is a great variant as well that you've seen with Laura popping out. But why this is probably well known is for his first appearance of Gabby. And we know that Gabby has become the sidekick of sort of Laura. And I don't think we've seen her pop up yet in the new in the Hickman run yet. I don't know if he's done anything with the clone. No, right?
Yeah, I have it. Now, I've not read every single issue. I have to admit. I gave up on a couple of those titles. Okay, good. I knew you would.
Right. Like, so Honey Badger is who.
Yeah, but has been all but forgotten.
Yeah, and she has a huge following. Like, if you look at like, that's a character who has a very big following. There are some of these peripheral characters who have not popped up. In fact, if you've been reading the Hickman's doing these giant size X-Men, which I'll go into a few in a bit, but he did giant size X-Men Nightcrawler, which is a really it's probably one of the last books to come out before they stopped publishing. And what that was essentially was Nightcrawler and a team went into the mansion to see what was going on since it had been abandoned. There was a gate from Krakoa leading right there, and it turns out that those little alien bounty hunters, and I'm gonna kill their names. I'm not even gonna pronounce them. And in fact, that connects into that Uncanny X-Men book we saw. They've taken over the mansion, and what we find out is that they have Lady Mastermind there, and that's where she's been. So now Lady Mastermind is introduced back into the sort of X-Men mythos again. She's sort of an interesting character. A lot of these villains now, they've taken central roles in what's going on, whether it be in the Council of 12, or what we see going on over in the Hellions as well with Sinister's team of reformed villains. So there's a lot of interesting things. And I as we get more into talking about House of X and Powers of 10, I think it's going to be really fascinating to see what is Hickman doing here. Is Hickman just recharacterizing how these well-known heroes and villains are, or is there something off a little? And I've spoken a little bit about these little touches in there that he keeps throwing in that show us that things aren't quite as they seem. And you get the feeling with Hickman always that the other shoe's going to drop. Whether you've read his Fantastic Four run or his Avengers run, his Secret War series, there's always something lurking in the background. And don't forget, all these characters he introduced early on in House of X and Powers of 10, they weren't just introduced just to get the ball rolling. They're going to pop up in a bigger way down the line. And I have some of the books that you may want to seek out from there as we start to go through as well. Let's look at one series that I think is interesting. I think this is so there's been a big call for New Mutants to come out on in demand, right? Because it's been delayed so long. I've seen the old Mutants jokes come out. We know that it's a pipe dream that they're going to release Black Widow on demand. I think that just took the November spot for the Eternals. But this beginning of this New Mutants run by DeFilippis and Weir, this introduced a lot of characters that I'll talk about in a minute. But what it's most known for are these beautiful Josh Middleton covers. So the first one is just a cover of all of them. Second cover is Mirage, Danny Moonstar, probably one of the most underutilized characters. I don't know, ever since they made her a Valkyrie back in the day, I don't think they've ever known how to sort of deal with this character. There, of course, is Amara, Magma. Then you have Sean, who is, of course, has the power to jump into different people's bodies. Remember that Shadow King lineup. This was, who is this supposed to be? Who is this? Because that's Sean McCoy. Any idea, Nico?
I thought that was Josh Middleton, but apparently I'm fucking stupid.
No, I just wonder who the character is, because I'm trying to figure that out, who the last one. And there's Wolfsbane, of course, on there. And then Yeah, why am I blanking on who that could be? Because that's not Sean McCoy. Anyway, why this is a great series to seek out apart from the Middleton covers is a lot of the characters from New X-Men and Young X-Men were introduced in here, including one of the characters that's become a huge part of the House of X run, Elixir, who's one of those 6 who are bringing the mutants back. Elixir was introduced in this New Mutants run. You had also Rockslide was introduced in this run. You had I want to say also, I'll show you. Then as it went on, everyone was chasing this book at one point, right? Because they thought Surge was going to be making an appearance. This is New Mutants 8. This is actually Chris Bacalo, his cover when he took over. But Surge was a hot commodity for a while because they thought she might pop up in Deadpool. And of course, all these characters were a big part of the Young X-Men and New X-Men run. That so here was a Young X-Men, and on here you see Rockslide. You see this character who I think is really a fascinating character, Dust. She has the power to sort of turn herself into a sandstorm. She was introduced in and actually in the New X-Men run, and she's on the cover of that New X-Men, and it's just her face underneath sort of the burqa as well. There's Rockslide in the middle, and the other part of that was the New X-Men, and that's a lot of the characters I just talked about. So you see Surge, you see Elixir. You see, I believe this character, I think she passed away. She had the power to go in the wind. Also, Prodigy, another character, was introduced in that New Mutants run as well. And there's Dust over there in the corner. And then I believe one of the Guthrie girls. And we'll talk more about the Guthries in a second. So that was a New Mutants. Again, this is when they relaunched it with the Philippus and Weir, but these Middleton covers, well, we're seeking out. So I've been talking a little, Nico. Why don't you pop in? Tell me what you got going so I can eat some pie.
All right. So you and I both talked, I guess, at length about how much we love Kitty Pryde. And while we'll try to refrain from books like this, because everybody knows them, they're going to be cheap now. The day that little pop that went, it's over.
Yeah.
No one cares. These sort of mid-level keys, for lack of a better description, they're the ones that are going to be dropping, I think, as the market ticks down. And when they dry up, because they end up in the hands of people like Gary and myself that won't sell them, you'll watch the prices climb right back up. So I would be cognizant of that. I think that the Kitty Pryde Wolverine relationship is a great one, potentially, for television. I like it as sort of a plot point that's been unexplored over the course of, I don't know, 10, 15 years of X-Men films. So I take a look at all of that. Now, what do you want me to start with here, buddy? First appearances, or you want to get into House of X stuff or covers?
Let's roll through some of those, because then we can keep jumping in and out as we now there's a stack. Oh, I see that X Factor right on the top.
Yeah, so I apologize. A lot of these are going to be doubles. I've got boxes and boxes down here of just unsorted X-Men stuff. But I kind of wanted to show people what I buy when I go out, if the price is right. So there's obviously no-brainer books like this, right? If the price is right, I'll pick them up. But these are books that you can grab out of dollar bins if you're lucky, and certainly out of back issue bins at small cons, because people don't know what they are. Gary, what's this book?
So now you're gonna put me on the so are you gonna talk a little bit about Penance in there and the whole deal behind that? Well,
right.
That's funny, Nico. Hold on, let me show the companion book for that.
Yeah.
So
I knew you'd have it.
So Penance is an interesting character, right? Because
Generation X #1 is not worth any money.
Right. So Generation X1 is not worth any money. And again, so you see this Generation X3, right? So what's interesting about this book is this has another interesting tie to that book.
If what you want to do, I think, is screenshot a lot of this crap, right?
Yeah. So Penance is a character who ends up having a very convoluted backstory, and it took we saw her pop up early here, and then now issue 40 is we're finally getting the truth about. So they really kept the reader on the hook for a long time. By the way, if you don't know Generation X and you've never read it, this is one now that you can pick up really cheap. This is just a great read. The Chris Speculators art was amazing in here, and some people find his work a little like confusing as he's jumping around. But so we saw this character Penance who ended up who was supposed to be connected to Monet. Am I correct on that? Right? They were like Monet and Penance were sort of siblings or something along that range. Penance ended up being a character that that was under the control of somebody else. And what's funny about this is because not only do you have a character who has a convoluted backstory there, you also had the introduction of Mondo in this book. And Mondo is a character who's become a really seminal part of House of X and Powers of 10, because Mondo is connected, just like Black Tom, to Krakoa. And now, but what we find out is that this Mondo here is not the Mondo that we thought. It's one of those stories where if you're a chaser of first appearances, you know, you have to pair things together. So Nico, that issue 40, why is that issue 40 particularly, like, why jump on like that issue that's so late in the run now? What happened?
Well, so it basically reveals that the Penance character that we have grown to, you know in the run is not the actual character. And, you know, I think that's going to be the book, but
yeah.
But
and again,
it's because of the lower print run later in the series. I think that's the one that people will gravitate to. She appears early in the House of X, Powers of X. Look, my poltergeist room. It started with a
I see.
Yeah, but look, I've got a backup plan.
It's all right. That's strobe lighting. I was actually happy just to have natural light. This is the first time I've done a daytime show in a long time, so I have my blinds open.
I've got blinds. I could do that.
Yeah, see that? Come on, Nico, let the light in, Nico. If you can't get out, at least let the out in.
I felt like that was like a soft rock song lyric.
Yeah, let the light in. Let the inside in. So come on. So Penance, that's not an exciting character, Nico. Show me some stuff. Let's go. What do we got here? Let's do some lightning rounds. You show me yours, I'll show you mine. And no, it's not going to be that kind of show.
That sounds gross. Well, I just wanted to give people some kind of concept of so there's all right. Just so that we're aware, I've only went through one little short box. There's more here we could do, episodes and episodes. But if you start buying these books now for $1 a piece, you end up with stacks like this, right? You know, like
but Nico, aren't there so many of those out there? Aren't those overprinted to the hilt? Why would I chase those books? I mean, everybody.
So I can slab them, get 9/8, and sell them for ridiculous amounts of money. I mean, it's for me, I always want 400, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times profit margin. That's an easy one. I buy in for $1. If I buy in late now, I buy in for $10. And, you know, I can get out for 150 after costs and expenses and eBay fees and all the other. So I'm doing that right now. Same deal with Bishop. There'll be a short box of them by the time I'm done. Pull them out of dollar bins. I pay $5 a piece for them. The key is, right, people will want like $10 and they'll be like, what if I take all 5?
What's that Bishop first issue, Nico, so people know?
Oh, 280. So it's 282. And again, this is a time where print runs are high, but print runs are high on the first appearance of Gambit. Personally, I think Bishop has way more appeal when it comes to TV or film than Gambit does.
Well, think about his backstory, right? It opens up that whole thing with you could introduce the Hounds, and you could use Bishop as sort of that central character instead of going back to Days of Future Past type thing.
Right. Well, you'll go in with him, right?
Right, of course.
Whose book's Cable's first appearance. It's an expensive book, but if you don't have them, you can flip first appearances of Bishops down the road to buy them.
So speaking of Cable, he's an interesting character, right? So we've seen. I don't know if if you got a chance to read the new Cable book, and I have to say that Jerry Duggan right now he's writing the Marauders book, which might be my favorite of the X books. But he also did get one of the issues of Cable out there by the really underappreciated Phil Noto. Phil Noto does a lot of covers, but when he does interiors, They're great. And at the end of that Cable book, spoiler alert, the new one, we saw that old Cable was back at the end. So we had the new Cable, Kid Cable, who was introduced in Extermination 1. And this is the awful Amanda Connor cover, but this was the highest ratio variant for that one. So this is where we actually saw the first appearance of the younger Cable, because old Cable had been killed. We don't know who it was, and then we find out it was actually younger Cable killing off old Cable because he had never done what, like, not accomplished his mission. So I think Cable is probably one of those characters, even though he popped up in Deadpool.
Yeah, they have to redo him. He's
right for solo and I know people have been crying for Hope for so long, and Hope Summers, and you and I spoke a little bit about that
awesome.
Yesterday or the day before yesterday. The other Cable book, this is the Stegman variants of, I don't know if people know Zach Thompson and Lonnie Nadler. They did a lot of independent work together. They're a great team. They do a lot of high concept science fiction. The Dregs was a book that I loved. I've spoken about in the past. But this was the Ryan Stegman Big Gun variant for Cable 155. There's also a Cannonball cover. And then I think Daniel Warren Johnson, who is another amazing artist creator, probably known for now giving out his Old Man Skywalker books at his shows. In this book, we meet Metis, and I think it's Metis and not Metis. And this is sort of a technological, organic thing that's hunting Cable throughout this whole sort of storyline. This was the end of the Cable run before it got revamped and relaunched, and then old Cable was killed off. But I think that's a character that if you see more done with Cable, that's a great storyline made for it. And there's sort of like this history between Metis and Hope is in there. So you want to be seeking out those characters that still have to be developed a little. Books that are sinking down. We've seen like these variants that people have sought out beforehand. They're kind of retaining their value. They're not dropping significantly. Anything I would say in that $25 to $50 range, and to me that's a mid-range like variant. Especially, I think this is maybe a 1 to 25. I think I believe. So just getting on Cable, thinking of that.
Yeah, and so what I would do if you get the chance, I think it's our responsibility to take books off the board, right?
Yeah.
You take them all at a show, cheap, like $10 books. Like there are none left. If people do that across the country, the books actually have legitimate value. So things like X Factor 5s, I take them off the board, $5, $10 a piece. Make sure there's none left. And I think you'll see like because you've got the wackadoos with no, this is the first appearance. No, this is the first time their arm was in a fucking shot, right? That you'll see, right? Yeah, you'll see that book pop. Jessica Cruz is a prime example. Ms. Marvel's a prime example. Same deal here. The one that I didn't grab and I should have, I'd have to dig it out, is the first appearance of Apocalypse that was in the graphic novel.
Yeah. And I don't have that. Yeah, I didn't bring my graphic novels out.
It's super expensive on showroom floors. It's not that expensive on eBay.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because what can people do, Nico? So you're talking about clearing boxes. Obviously, that's not going to be a reality for some time, right? Because one, you can't leave your house, and two, because all the comic shops closed. So what do we do now? Because no My Comic Shop, right? Am I right? My Comic Shop is down.
Nucadia, done.
So there are shops. I mean, creative Google searching has gotten me some of my best books, and everyone has their little internet, little hidey holes, honey holes that are out there, and I. When you're looking for books that you want to buy in quantity, a lot of times these are the places to look for, because these are shops that may have an online presence because they're so isolated and people can't get to them. Online business is the only thing that's going to keep them afloat, and they're still sort of subsisting in this new world order. So these are books, write these down, like write them down for what we're hoping, in the summer. And there's going to be, guess what? There are going to be a lot of people sitting on a lot of stock that they're going to be needing to get rid of. And again, Nico and I have spoken about this. We don't prescribe to a vulture mentality of taking advantage of those who can't get it. But if you can put your money out there, it's not like all of these books, you'll see my eBay shop is shut right now. I don't have any live auctions going. My only things are buy it now. I shut down to the end of April just because I don't want to go to the post office to mail something out. I've gotten like 5 offers on books within the last 2 days. So people are looking to buy books right now. If you're in a place where you feel it's isolated enough, your post office is operating, this is an opportunity for you to be selling these books and to be and getting these books out there. So I think in some ways we're seeing a seller's market, but in other ways, you don't want to be you don't want to be that guy who is like, okay, I'm going to buy you out because I'm your only option, your only alternative. You know, we don't prescribe to that scumbag mentality, I would say, right, Nico?
Amen.
Yeah, I mean that's important. So let's pop through some books
All right.
real quick. So here's one that we've seen popping up. There you go. So that's great.
Easy. They're easy.
Let me go. Hold that book
Easy
up again,
peasy.
Nico. Hold those up, and I'm going to
Easy
show.
peasy.
So I just sold I sold one of those New Mutants 18 9.8, I guess about 2 months ago, because we'd seen, you know, the Demon Bear finally did pop up in the trailer. 19.
Difference between Gary and me is he sells the books properly on time when they should be sold. I sit on them in boxes and stacks like a moron.
Nico, as I told you before, if you let me just tell you, I sit on a lot of books and don't get them out in time, just so we're really clear on that. Please don't. You know, I hit the point where I was putting 50 books up at a time. That's the most I've ever got going in my store, and about half of them were higher range, sort of buy it nows, and the other half were like auctions of hotter books out there. That strategy seems to work pretty well for me. But the reason I show this, I think I've shown this before. When you showed New Mutants 18, this predates right before Bill Sienkiewicz came on the run, and you know he did the cover for 17 as well. In this book, in this Marvel Age, and Marvel Ages are great, and if I'm sure a lot of you know Topher, who's done work with CBSI, and he does these True First. So not only do you have this sort of really cool like power pack, remember that power pack ad where we didn't even know what they were going to look like yet. We just had those sort of things pop out. In here, we find out, remember these guys start. So just reading through these Marvel Ages, guys, buy cheap Marvel Ages. Read through this, especially if you have a history. So they have a talk with Claremont in here, and he's showing some great art. This is coming soon, Black Dragon from Epic. Another, by the way, Epic. I've been buying Epic books left and right lately. You're hearing a lot about how people want to revitalize, including Alien Legion. But you look in here and you see it says, who is this mysterious new mutant named Warlock, right? So not only do we get a named first appearance, we get a beautiful Sienkiewicz shot, first time Warlock appearing in print over here in this interview with Claremont. These are the kind of things that I love to just sort of put aside. I don't think this is going to shoot up as high as New Mutants 18 went. Who knows what will happen with New Mutants if they do release it on video on demand and then they reboot it and relaunch it again. But that franchise is so sort of rife with potential, particularly, and I was going to say this for the House of X Powers of 10, but I showed this in the past. This New Mutants 13, to me, this character I spoke about last time, and there's Kitty Pryde popping through again.
Who is that? Cypher.
Yeah. So this
Cypher.
Is the newsstand, and there's the regular, right? So there's a newsstand of this. I think these were maybe like $8 and $6 respectively. Cypher has become a key character in House of X, and there are little things going on with him. We saw recently in the last issue of X-Men, Cyclops shows up, and all of a sudden we see Cypher and Warlock having a discussion, and then Cyclops does a double take, and then we see just Cypher with the Warlock arm again. We find out in that giant-sized X-Men Nightcrawler that Cypher and Warlock are actually separated and apart from one another, so that's revealed in there. So those are huge characters. That New Mutants 18. I sold that New Mutants 21, the Slumber Party issue, which is the origin of Warlock and the Magus as well within there. So I think that's a great book to be looking after. I think I showed that just briefly, but that X-Men Adventures 1, why this book popped up on Key Collector was if you have,
I screwed up, dude. I screwed up. I had like 100 copies of those, and I sold them all for nothing when I got back into comics.
And this is great. Steve Lytle cover. So Steve Lytle, who rarely does Marvel work, he did the Legion, really nice copy, but again, pulled out of a long box. And there's been speculation that this is going to be popping up on Disney Plus because all of the X-Men avatars were released that you can have on your Disney Plus thing. And this is the first appearance of Morph from the X-Men Adventures, not the Morph who pops up later in the Exiles, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit as well. So X-Men Adventures 1, great cheap book. If you were a fan of the cartoon, ironically, I was not a huge fan of the X-Men cartoon growing up. I don't know. I
wasn't either, and I think that's because we read the comics, right? So like people who didn't read the comics but just watched the cartoon, they're like, "This is great," and I'm like, "That's not my gambit."
Yeah, it's so funny, Nico.
You know what I mean?
I think I have a lot of gaps in my cartoon sort of. I think
like that's not what Bishop's like in my head.
No, and then
you know,
I think
like he's hard. This guy's not.
Yeah, Super Friends was the only show that I really had to watch every week when that was on back in the day with
Iceman and
yeah, and who was it? The guy, the really obscure ones that only popped up there and you never saw again, like Apache
right.
Chief. Then
Yeah.
remember, yeah, that's not politically correct these days.
No,
right, keep rolling through some books.
What I wanted to do was crank out. I put my swords away because I was like, are swords? Do swords count as X books? It starts in the X-Men. Yeah, it was a categorizational thing. I would just put them away. I'm like, Gary's gonna yell at me, and then I see
no.
I'm like, work's done.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So I wanted to just crank out like what I call like cheap blue chippers, which is sort of what this is, because these are the books that I think you can buy, and in spite of like the COVID craziness, you'll see a dip now, but you'll watch them come back up. The prices will stabilize, and I think they'll appreciate over time, and you're not going to get burned on the investment. I think they're smart, shrewd buys. Things like what's his face? Your everybody's favorite psychopath, Professor X had his Phantom X. Professor X had his body for a minute.
There you go, and there he is on the back cover, so you can see that was the next issue. He was on the cover.
Dude, if that was the freaking cover, man.
I mean, I love Phoenix covers as well, but so this is New X-Men 128, New X-Men 129. We're going to show some more of the storylines later, but what this Morrison run, so rife with potential, and yeah, stockpile these, Nico.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to you helping me with that. So what we talked about before with the it's the first appearance, it's not the first appearance. These ones you can still get cheap, super cheap. Now I've seen people pay crazy money for them, like $40 or something on a Conflor. Please don't be that person paying $40 for them on eBay.
So why was that? I saw Ahab on the cover. Why care about that?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's this is like a legitimate first appearance of Gambit. Yeah. I love this story too. I'll talk a little bit more about that with the House of X, Powers of X stuff. Why I think that there's a shot there with all of that. And then I like blue chip females, right? So Jubilee and Dazzler. I don't think you can go wrong with books like that. They're established characters. Depending on a casting, they go bananas. If you can get them cheap, grab them. I never suggest paying market price really for anything ever. That could be just because I'm a tight ass, or it could be just that I think that's the way to buy books. You buy for less than market and you sell them when the market moves. But that's just my take.
So let's talk about I think those are two interesting characters. Jubilee, who has a storied history with the X-Men.
Her vampire stuff, those vampire variants, I'll pull those out. I loved it. Loved it.
That whole, and I think you see vampires like in the new Wolverine that's been out now, right? That's
now you're reading my mind.
Benjamin Percy is all over that. And I'm going to show some of those covers. We have so much good stuff to show today, Nico. So I don't know how much time you have. I may have to fill my coffee up at some point. But
we can take an intermission.
Yeah, I think those are. I think those are super important, but Jubilee and Dazzler to me are very much relics of an era. So can you take those characters and update them in a way that keeps them fundamentally who they are for those who would really gravitate towards them, yet make them interesting to a new audience? Like Jubilee with that yellow raincoat, that bubblegum mall sort of look that she had, and Dazzler, who is very much like a singer of the disco era. How do you take those characters, remain true to who they are, and true to their looks, and Dazzler's look has changed over the years, but to me that's important. Like when you're making that translation, people don't want to see characters that don't look like what they saw. Like I finally watched Dark Phoenix, or I watched In and Out. I watched Dark Phoenix while I was working on it, and I was like, first of all, that Cyclops is so bland, right? Like I don't think they've ever been able to capture Cyclops right in an X-Men movie yet. So that's just my, James Marsden, and then whoever was in the last one. Nightcrawler looked like some skinny kid in the last one. I do like what they did with the kid from Kick-Ass taking over as Quicksilver. He's a really what a great character that was in terms of that, and Quicksilver, right? Yeah. But for me, it's always looking at like, who are those characters that you can take? They may be great in a book, but maybe they don't exist in another medium, and that makes it interesting about like how much, what's that tipping point of what you should pay for those kind of characters as well. I love Jubilee, and I think they've done a lot with her. They've made her a major character in the new Excalibur, and she actually has a son who morphs into a dragon now, back and forth. Her son Togo. which is a really weird. It's a weird book. I don't know if I love Excalibur. It's one of my all-time favorite, but the new one throwing me off just a little bit. Timmy Howard is doing a lot of deep English fantasy stuff. Speaking of swords again, yeah, as well. So I think those are both interesting characters. Here's another book, and so do you know this book, Nico? Why this book?
Yeah, first appearance is S.W.O.R.D.
Yeah, to me, S.W.O.R.D is a no-brainer, right?
Astonishing X-Men 6, right?
Yeah, and great cover. Again, you see Kitty popping up in Colossus's arms. This is there's always been a lot of controversy about that whole romance between them, and then when she went off with Pete Wisdom, yeah, there's always aging of younger characters is always really difficult to portray in books, and especially if they're having a relationship with a techno-organic steel Russian not minor, it becomes a major issue for some people. But S.W.O.R.D, which was sort of, they were the space version of S.H.I.E.L.D, looking for extraterrestrial sort of investigating. And Abigail Brand, who had a cameo earlier on, but this is her first full in here as well, who later developed a relationship with the Beast, Hank McCoy, right? So I love this. I love this whole Astonishing X-Men run. We spoke about 4 earlier. We spoke about just that issue 1, the classic cover with Wolvie's blades coming up and out of there. And if you love to read books, I think Astonishing X-Men, if you haven't read it, grab the trade, because Joss Whedon was on fire right after his Firefly stuff and some of the stuff. He was the central character in there.
That's exceptional run. And
other really important part of this was this developed a relationship that became one of the strongest, I think, in more recent X books of Kitty and Emma Frost. You don't have to be full for that one, but Emma Frost and Kitty, this really developed their relationship to a new level, whereas the point where Emma Frost chose Kitty Pryde to be her Red Queen before they just killed her off in Marauders recently. So that's a book to be looking after. What else do we have going on here? Let's see. Another book that's popped up recently, and we just saw the stuff going on in Brood, right? We've spoken about this before. We know Mr. and Mrs. X #3. This introduces the daughter of Charles Xavier and the dear departed Liliandra. The daughter is Zandra. She popped up as an egg. Then she looked like one character before she finally took the form of looking more like a traditional sort of Shi'ar Empress. She has been, she is currently going to be a major part of that Empire series. And if you didn't read Road to Empire, you missed some of the most beautiful art I've seen in a comic in a long time. Please check that out. Like, that was a book that was stunning. There were 2 artists in there. And I don't want to slaughter their names right now, but I'll look for that as well. But she's ended up being a big character here and also over in New Mutants, where we know that they just sent Deathbird to be sort of her mentor, and we saw that she's going to take the throne from Gladiator, who had taken over, ruling the Shi'ar Empire. For those who don't know, Empire is not going to be a war between the Shi'ar and the Kree, but rather, I'm sorry, the Skrulls and the Kree, but rather the Krulls and the Skree and the Skrulls and Krees teaming up to fight the I want to call them the Zostil, or the plant-like creatures. Oh no, the Katati. Do you know these, Nico? Am I taking you down?
I got nothing.
Yeah. So the Katati are the plant-like beings that were on a planet where they existed with the Kree at the same time. The Kree, being very warlike, ended up going up against and killing off, or they thought killing off, all the Katati. It ended up the Katati went underground, and then they ended up actually coming back during the Celestial Messiah storyline, which dealt with Mantis and her son, who now is going to end up being one of the major villains in Road to Empire. And I've spoken about that. That Celestial Quest, I think 3 is his first appearance. But I don't want to go too down the rabbit hole here. But anything Shi'ar, anything Starjammers, anything dealing with space, we've seen a lot of things going on with that. We know that the Summers clan is up on the moon right now. We know that other entities are up on the moon as well. So that's going to tie into that if we ever get to see Empire X-Men. But first appearance of Zandra. This book was pretty hot for a while. I think that's a character we could see play a major part in this. And again, you never know what's going to come down the line.
Yeah. You want to run through House of X, Powers of X stuff?
Yeah, let's do it.
You start. I'm going to try to get things in order because, again, I went through. I've got more boxes, but I went through a couple, and now I've just got like stacks of doubles and crap. So
that's perfect. All right, so I'll start running through. So it all started right. back with X-Men Seeds of Tomorrow, Hickman, X-Men Revealed. This was a freebie that was distributed in a lot of stores. You may still be able to find this. This actually had, and I'm going to pull this copy out. So as you look through this book, so it has that actually famous scene that we saw where we find out the most important scene in the history of the X-Men. And this is where we find out why Moira is such an important part. It actually has a whole preview of House of X1 inside. And then they have a lot of the covers, including first appearances of some of those characters that we saw, like Rasputin, right? And the Cardinal, which is a red Nightcrawler on the bottom. Characters, by the way, that we haven't seen since these minis. And it says Dawn of X will be revealed. Remember, these characters, this one at the end, she sort of created this this black hole singularity that she disappeared into. That's going to come into play with another character. We saw a lot of this Omega character, right? I want to call her Karima Shandar, I think. But she pops up in this book. This is X-Men Unlimited 27. And within this storyline, we see this Omega Mastermind, Omega Sentinel. Sorry, Omega Sentinel. She's been working on supposedly the side of those who are trying to develop the new Master Mold and the new Sentinel programs. So we know that character is going to play a major part. We know that some of the characters from House of X and Powers of 10, and here then, of course, everyone, I'm sure, got their favorite variant. This was the party edition. You can see that was $10, and I bought this. I want to give a big shout out to Escape Pod Comics in Huntington. I was picking up some Golden Age books from a friend, and I ran into the shop, and he had it on the wall.
Huntington, West Virginia?
No, not West Virginia though. Long Island, New York. I'm in the borough, so that's why I'm in house arrest, and I have time to do this stuff.
I gotcha.
So we had that House of X1, right, which was a great book. Then this ended up being sort of the key, the House of X2, where we find out that Moira has lived through all of these different iterations of what's gone on. So this made everything that happened in the X-Men sort of canon. So there weren't just reboots and pre-boots, but things kept happening over and over again. And once Moira was died, then that storyline or that timeline sort of stopped, right? And I'm not going to get into the whole timeline convolutions of that. There were some really great variants within this run. Jeff Deckel, one of my favorite artists. I have a lot of commissions by him. Nice Psylocke variant. We saw the Emma Frost, and I want to say Tom Huddleston did a bunch of these together. And then there were these connecting covers, and I continue to find these connecting covers at a cheap rate. So we have these go together to form, and this was House of X4 and Powers of 10-4. So you can see, you remember those classic costumes from that Jim Lee era, right? You also had a really nice David Nakayama cover. And if you're not a David Nakayama fan, he does some really cool, he's been doing serial box work. So this was, again, the Savage Land X-Men, right? Who everybody loved back in the day. Everyone loved Savage Land Rogue, especially. And there she is up top with Gambit. And this was Powers of 10-5 and House of X 5 as well. Some of the other ones I liked, the La Fuente House of X 5 cover. And I'm just going to show you some covers and then get into. We had this foreshadowing variant, right? We just saw all of a sudden in Wolverine who popped back up, but Omega Red, right? And Omega Red is working along with Dracula as an agent of Dracula. Kitty Pryde again, because I had to have the Kitty Pryde cover. So House of X and Powers of 10 told these two separate stories that then launched off into this Alpha, right? This Dawn of X-Men, and this was the X-Men 1 where we relaunched the whole sort of X-Men franchise. I love the Jean Grey cover. For those who don't know, this is Russell Darterman, who did the amazing art on the giant-sized X-Men book, which I'll show right here. This was the first of the giant-sized X-Men launch with Jean Grey and Emma Frost. I don't buy a lot of store variants, but I did love. They had the Virgin variant, and then they did sort of the Hellfire Club version of that as well. So this that had a great Russ Dorterman art in it. So the big things that came out of that series were we started to see that any X-Men could be killed at any time, and then they could be brought back to life. And a lot of attention was paid to this book, Excalibur, because within this book, and if you've watched my other show, I went into a little more detail on this, but it's sort of a Kurt Solo story where he ends up on an island with the son of Krakoa. And there have been multiple sons of Krakoa, but why this caught people's interest was because there were these little red sort of eggs in here. And in these red eggs, as we'll see in a second, and you can see a better shot there where he's being sort of attacked, and Krakoa looks like this giant like frog being. So we have these Vega men pop out. So we see that the X-Men and the vegetable sort of symbiotic relationship of the two together, they created this Vega Man, which is sort of cheesy, but the concept of these X-Men coming out and their sort of genetic templates being within was a big part of this book. And then the son of Krakoa ends up at the end sort of dying because, ironically, he's a frog guy and can't swim. And then it sort of says, I think at the end, like sort of the end, like the end, right? So we didn't hear anything about this. So this is sort of a one and done. No one would ever think of it. But people started saying, oh, wait a minute. Is this where maybe John Hickman got his ideas from? And we've seen him sparking so many ideas. Even in that Journey into Mystery, The Birth of Krakoa, this was a book that they were doing these sort of anniversary editions. This was the Ben Caldwell cover, who I just showed some original art from before. Dennis Hope listed the writing in here. And what we saw within this series was they land off and it's a horror story where they're getting taken over by the vegetation. And then at the end, we sort of see Krakoa like sort of lurking in the background. So Krakoa has always been a big part of sort of the X-Men mythos way back from '94. We saw also that there's a sister island, Aroak, I think is how you pronounce it. It's like Krakoa backwards. And I think why that's important is because we're going to see maybe the whole time that Krakoa has had some sort of influence over what's been happening, or perhaps because we see Doug at some point in House of X actually touch the vegetation when he's being introduced to the island, when Charles first brings him there. The techno-organic virus may have, the transmode virus may have infected Krakoa. So we don't know exactly what's going on there yet. It's sort of like we're being left in the dark purposely by John Hickman on that. I also think it's well worth people's while to go back and seek out some of the earlier John Hickman stuff, especially in Fantastic Four. We're seeing some of those storylines come back into play. Funnily enough, like in Venom, where we see the Maker, right, which took the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards from Ultimate Fantastic Four 1, has slowly turned him into a major architect of something that's going on with symbiotes in the Marvel universe. But that Fantastic Four 571 was sort of Hickman's beginning, and this is a key issue because, of course, we have the Council of Reeds in here who are starting to come back in a big way as well. But so Hickman sort of ties in all these things together. Characters he loves. We talked about Mondo. Like Mondo's become a big character. Remember Gold Balls they were talking about. We've seen the Guthrie clan sort of. They pop up briefly in the ROM Annual 3 of all places, where the New Mutants made an appearance. We just saw that one of the Guthries battling against Apocalypse in this thing that they were called. It's not called the Culling. It was called something along those lines. Where the Crucible, maybe, where they battle to the death and then they get to be reborn. And then she's reborn again as a mutant within there. So he loves these characters that sort of keep popping up in the background again and again. Let's see. Do I have a couple other of those stories? Let's see. Yeah, I guess those would be the major ones that I would be looking at in terms of House of X and Powers of 10. That's sort of it all in a nutshell. Okay. Other things, yeah. Go ahead, Nico.
So I'm like Gary. I very much love this book. Yeah. Okay. This is the reason I love it. Can you see here? Every single copy I have has a color up. Everyone.
Let's see if it was. Are you talking about right up near the staple?
Yeah. Well, look down both. Yeah. Top staple, bottom staple. They're just. It's a pain in the butt. And that's why I love that book, because good luck finding it without color rubs. Okay. One of the characters that you didn't talk about that I really have hope for, but this is more George's internal Homer, is the adult version of Franklin Richards.
Yeah.
I love that character as a kid. And I think if people are like me that are in the creative seat now, they'll have nostalgia for that character as well. We've seen the breadcrumbs already, right? I mean, they're setting it up, and the reason that this is cool, this is the continuation of probably the storyline that is everyone's favorite X-Men storyline ever.
Yep. Days of Future Past and
that was Days of Future Present.
Yep.
Right. So we talked a lot about kind of blue chip books before. I think those are blue chip storylines, right? The Days of Future Past stuff. I like the first appearance of the Sentinels. If I would have known that this like COVID-19 nightmare was going to happen, I probably wouldn't have sold. My first appearance of the Sentinels, I sold an 8.5 on eBay, hoping to grab another copy. And now it's like anybody who's got a nicer copy probably isn't going to put it up until this is all over, because it's such a nice book. Those are the kinds of like keys, but
off the radar keys that until they're on the radar, right? And that's why it's so important, Nico, to be stockpiling these books, and you can't go into this with sort of I'm going to flip this right away, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The Krakoa books, I mean, I grab them every chance I can get, the high grade ones. I like also the first Starjammers as a longer term play. Now, the one that I can't find is the 35-cent variant. I've never seen one sold.
Yeah, and again, I think those are some of those books that like people keep sort of locked in the vaults, right? Because they know.
Absolutely. I'm not trying to suggest that they're not out there, but someone is like, "Well,
yeah." And
when they do the X-Men, when this makes it to a film, why wouldn't you introduce the Starjammers when that happens? When it's an intergalactic space opera of X-Men proportions. Somebody's going to pay a few $1,000s for that book.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that also that, I see, you're buying a lot of those raw copies of those books. These are not the books that we're recommending you go out and buy a 9.8 of, right? Like there are books you can go out and get a 9.8 of that you can buy cheap from like a $30 to $60 range that may,
I'll give you a good example, right? Like if I wanted to pay top dollar, I would have gone and bought a 9.8. Instead, I went and bought these.
Yeah.
All the same book.
Yeah, that now you're speaking my language.
First appearance in Nimrod.
Yeah.
All the same book.
And that is one of the best storylines that storyline within that book is sort of amazing. And that's actually, speaking of a character that's popped up all over the place, Kulan Gath, right? Like Kulan Gath has been rolling through Savage Avengers, rolling through Conan, and in that storyline where Nimrod is introduced, and I think his name is like Jaime, it looks like Jamie, but it's Jaime. It's this guy's like wearing something, and then we see the sort of Nimrod come out of that situation at the end of 188 going into 189 or 189, I think.
And I did the same thing with Phalanx, right? Same thing. Yeah. And I didn't just do it with that book. I did it with all of the different appearances that were early, because frankly, I have no idea how this thing's going to shake out. With
all the Phalanx stuff early in House of 10, right? I mean, House of X, so much of it involved.
I mean, that is the storyline. It's the same. And I don't know if I'm going to have to sell this crap in sets or how I'm going to have to get rid of it. Or if one of those issues is going to go bananas.
And you pull your best copies out and you're like, okay, does this have potential for me to send it in and slab it? Or is it something I'm going to leave out there raw? But whenever you can do that, whenever you can grab a big stack and get at least one 9.8 out of it, all of a sudden you've made bank. So that's important as well.
So in other words, if you're like me, I think they are, every step of the road, it seems as if they have to, Disney has to tell some version of House of X, Powers of 10, on the big screen to sort of explain what's going on. I mean, they can't do it through, you know, the Scarlet Witch's kids. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, what makes sense? What makes sense is to do her, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just does. It's the story we all wanted. We didn't know we wanted, and when we got it, people are back for the first time in a decade reading X-Men books voraciously, with Jonathan Hickman at the helm. Hickman being the driver behind the Infinity War saga. You know, obviously he didn't write the original Infinity Gauntlet series, but what does Disney do? They put him back on the book so that they can get a modern retelling and sort of adopt some of his plot points for the big screen. You know, so you hear people like Donny Cates say, like, well, nobody called me about Venom. But the reality is now Kevin Feige's in charge of Marvel Creative. And I think there was a closer relationship with, you know, Disney corporate and, you know, the storylines than people want to let on. Far before that, right? Because we saw the plot points that were teased out of the pages of Hickman's Avengers and Infinity run on the Avengers films, Civil War, thereafter, you know, Endgame and so forth. But with Hickman at the helm and Feige in charge of creative, it seems like those universes are going to be interlinked when they go to television and when they go to film. So I'm paying extra close attention and, again, trying to really hone in on who the key players are going to be.
Yeah,
that's sort of my take.
I think that's key. And like I said, I'm of two mindset. One, I worry that Hickman has this big blueprint that's only in here, sort of like George R.R. Martin, right? So you end up all of a sudden saying, okay, where is this going? And you know, what is that other shoe that's going to drop? But the great thing about that is you've established now this whole sort of base for all the mutants. And now you can go off and tell these stories of, like they're doing with the new X books. Like you have the Marauders over here, like they're involved in like, and getting this medicine out to, and saving mutants who can't enter into the gateways. Over here on this corner, you have Excalibur taking place in the magic realm and seeing how mutants interact with magic. So you have all these different sort of storylines. New Mutants are going off into the space aspect of it. So you can set up, establish this world, and then all of a sudden you have these ready-made little mini franchises set up to move off from. So it makes a lot of sense to me. It ties it all together. It cuts a lot of the convoluted backstory of some of these characters, as we saw. Like I still can't figure out who Jessica Chastain's character was in Dark Phoenix. You know, an amalgam of all of these villains, or just a generic, like I don't even want to go there. But I think that's a really important part of what you bring up of where do they go with that X franchise. You can't keep rehashing the same storylines over and over again. You have to start branching off into new areas. So let's talk a little bit, Nico. We have some time. We still have some time still.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to bring.
What do you think you're going to do? Go list books or exercise? That's not going to happen.
So I'm going to show some storylines that I think are great sort of inroads for people who are just looking to read right now, and books that may have eventual payoff down the line. I'm hoping that if you're listening, that's great. I'm hoping if you guys are listening there.
For the record, thank you to the people that are watching. Gary can't see the live comments, and I've done a shitty job of putting them up timely. I just saw that one roll up, so I got to hit it quick. But anyway, keep going.
I'm the opposite of whatever the opposite of a multitasker is. That's me. Because my brain is so fried. But I'm hoping people who are watching are not only looking to like make money and collect and speculate, but I hope you're also readers and and lovers of these books, like like Nico and I are.
Yeah,
and I think
one of the things we should remind people, for the love of God, don't make the mistakes that I do. I listen to a lot of comic book related media in my car when I'm driving, on my cell phone when I'm in the shower. I got like a little thing, and I don't take screenshots. I don't write things down, and then I forget what the crap they are. if you like something, remember to screenshot it or jot down what the hell it is and throw it in a saved search so you can snag it at a deal. Anyway, please continue, Gary.
Or you just watch on a loop over and over and over again, right?
Sounds terrible. It sounds terrible.
I'm going to do a speed round of some books, and so these are storylines and things that I think people should be looking out for. First book
I'll be writing these ones down.
We've seen Marvel and DC. We've seen a big call for like Marvel and DC should have this crossover and bring back all these books that we remember from growing up. Whether it be that Hulk versus Superman, whether it be we see not the Muhammad Ali versus Superman, but the Hulk versus Superman. In fact, I just saw they had two endings for that, where Hulk took care of Superman and where Superman took care of Hulk. But the first, to me, the granddaddy of that one was Uncanny X-Men and Teen Titans. And these were, I spoke about this book in the past. This is two teams at the top of their popularity. And there's a great back cover because this is a wraparound cover with Darkseid and Phoenix on the front. This was the one that sort of launched the idea that you could have Marvel and DC interacting. You had creators at the top of their game. Claremont did it with Walt Simonson. Terry Austin did the cover art on here. You could see, right, like within there. What an amazing story. This is also the first true appearance of the Source Wall in form, which was created by Jack Kirby. But this is just a great read. If you've never read it, I highly recommend you get this. Grab those JLA Avengers books as well. But keeping X-Men theme, this is a great crossover tie-in. I brought up Astonishing X-Men.
For the record, exceptional. The Teen Titans X-Men, absolutely exceptional.
That book to me, and if you were not New Teen Titans, a lot of people don't know this. Their popularity was rivaling X-Men at the time when Wolfman and Perez were putting this book out. And that original lineup of Robin, Wonder Girl, Starfire, Garth. Spoke about Astonishing X-Men, Joss Whedon run, beautiful black cover, right? This book is like $3 you can get this book for still. And John Cassidy art, Cassidy, who has been a long time X guy. Brought up this X-Men run. So this X-Men run was the one where it starts out where they're battling against Dracula, and it's sort of that had those great Adi Granov covers on some of this X-Men run down the line. But this was the variant, and it was PM. I wonder who. Well, anyway. I've been collecting all those vampire books. I think I showed also that 9.8 of they had all these vampire variants that they put out. But we're seeing that they're doing something with Dracula over in the Avengers with Jason Aaron. We're seeing him over in Wolverine. These vampire tie-overs are going to be tie-ins are going to be really big down the line. So I recommend this. I think Victor Gischler did this run, and it sort of petered off after the vampire run, but one I highly recommend. And it had a really cool blank cover, which is like a little blood splatter on the page. And blanks you can always get cheap, and they're great to have on hand. Uncanny X-Force. This has a lot of love in people's hearts. This is a Remender Opeña run. This is really a great lineup, great costumes. You see Deadpool, Archangel, Psylocke, Wolverine, and again, there's Phantom X showing up. So Phantom X, one of those characters that's popping up in the peripheral of a lot of areas. A miniseries I loved, and a character that was very divisive, X-Men Deadly Genesis. And this was telling the story of this X-Men that existed outside of the timeline that we all thought that happened after Uncanny X-Men 94. This was a series, and this shows you this was this character Darwin over here. You had Thunderbird. You had a couple of characters that I don't even know. And then, of course, you had Vulcan. And Vulcan ended up being the third Summer's brother, Unleashed. Vulcan's ended up being a big character in the Hickman run over here. I brought up also War of Kings being a really thing to seek out. One of the tie-ins to War of Kings was the X-Men Emperor Vulcan by Christopher Yost, who is amazing, again, does great space opera, mutant book fiction. But I think that you want to seek out definitely Vulcan appearances. Jumping through, I know Nico brought up earlier a little bit about this, but this one of my all-time favorite, just two books two quick tie-ins. We saw this book heat up again because of the appearance of maybe the Valkyrie character, who was like a trans Valkyrie character that popped up in here, and then people jumped over to Angela Asgard's assassin for another character. But this is a story about the X-Men sort of interacting in Asgard, and if you're not an Art Adams, if you're not familiar with Art Adams, this is him at his like all-time best. People probably know him best for Long Shot. Keeping rolling through here. Wolverine has been around so long. His new series is out, but some people are not. And again, these are my reading copies, and that's why they don't even have bags in them. But Mark Millar did a great 12-issue run here that started with Enemy of the State, where sort of it was everybody in the Marvel Universe against Wolverine, and he was taking everyone down, and he was being controlled. If you recall, when he was killed and then brought back to life. And then this tied right into Wolverine, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And this was another 6-point, and I love that sort of Steranko-esque sort of cover. These are just the regular covers, but if you're looking for things to read, if you're a Wolverine fan, this was such an awesome sort of 12-issue run that started with, again, and there's issue 30, and then it ended up with issue 31. But it ran from 20 right through 31. So I would seek those out. Cheap books you can grab from your local comic shop online. Another book that I've spoken about again and again as being key, I think, in terms of major storylines, but also some great characters. So New X-Men, Morrison was still doing his run through here. He created all of these great characters earlier in the run, starting in the 1-teens up through the 120s. And then he really started to sink into, so we did Assault on Weapon Plus, and we've seen Weapon Plus pop up again recently, and we saw all these different Weapon Plus programs, everything from that manslaughter to brute force being looped into the Weapon Plus program. This, we saw Morrison's take on it with these sort of cool covers. And then from Assault on Weapon Plus, I'm a big fan of sort of looking at these storylines where they jump into tomorrow. And this was Here Comes Tomorrow. And we saw a lot of different versions of the X-Men jumping through Morrison and Mark Silvestri, who a lot of people will remember him as their seminal sort of X-Men artist. For me, it was Paul Smith. And again, we see this final cover, and that was New X-Men 151 through 154. This sort of had this futuristic characters, some where we may see pop up again. You may recognize over here Cassandra, right, who there was this whole weird thing with Zorn and other characters within this timeline. And there was a Sentinel that was actually working with the X-Men. Great storylines, but also ripe for potential with possible speculative value down the line. Final series I'm going to pop into, that is one of my favorite underrated series, was Wolverine and the X-Men. This was the Jason Aaron and Chris Bacalo edition. Issue 1 had the first appearance of Kid Gladiator, who we've seen popping up recently again in X-Men. So these characters that sort of stay on the fringe and the periphery, we see Hickman using them again.
Hey Gary, when does Quentin Quire, how the fuck do you say his name? Appear?
Quentin Quire was Quentin Quire was and what were they calling him? Kid Omega? Was that his
Kid Omega.
Yeah, Kid Omega.
Did he first appear in that series, or
he first appeared, I believe, also in that new X-Men series, but I'm going to tell you right now, New X-Men 134.
Nice.
Yeah, and so
because he was a big part of this run. I really liked this Jason Aaron run.
Yeah, and did you see there was a great Wolverine and Kid Omega series that started with the Alpha and went to an Omega? But yeah, he's a major part of this, and they've gone back to sort of him being like this a-hole character, but they were actually having him soften up a little. I like the cocky version, but maybe when they rebooted him to an earlier version, and that's the interesting thing about Hickman's run. Like, when are they pulling these characters out? When are we going to start seeing these chimeras, I guess is how you pronounce that? These blended mutant characters that we see popping up later in the run. But just running back to Wolverine and the X-Men, Krakoa was a major part. They were actually living on something, and Krakoa was actually a character within the Wolverine and the X-Men run. There he is, Kid Omega. Remember when Wolverine was cool? Me neither. Great cover, right? And then, speaking of books that jumped in the past, we saw this Greetings from the Jean Grey School of Tomorrow. This was Wolverine and the X-Men 29. New characters popping up that you never know who may show up. We've also seen a lot being done now with the Hellfire Club, the young Hellfire Club that took over. They're sort of this what are they calling themselves? Hominids something, or sort of these humans that don't think mutants should take over. So the Hellfire Saga really built up this group as being major enemies of the X-Men, and they're teaming up, and there he is sitting front and center. He's going to end up being one of those major characters down the line. We saw him get his comeuppance recently, but that's a 5-part Hellfire Wolverine and the X-Men from 31, 30 through 35, and just other series down the line. You and I spoke about Messiah War. This was the X-Force cable thing where Hope was first sort of introduced. Nothing like a young girl on the cover with a big gun to really get the censors up and roaring, and then also Second Coming, which popped out of there. And this had great Addie Granoff covers, and Hope was now all grown up and ready to kick some tail with Cable. So some quick storylines to run through. If you're looking for things to run, you can get these. You can buy them digitally. You can buy trades of these. You can buy the originals, of course, down the line. But again, nothing high ratio, nothing that's going to kill your pocketbook. I'm going to show some of those books in a little while that may, if you like covers, we're going to show some really cool covers in a couple minutes.
Shall we start? So you talked about these guys, right?
Yeah.
They are the Mike Mayhew vampire variants. I think that's the Oh, there she is. How you going?
Yeah. Right? Are we on Nick or what?
Yeah. I like them.
And I think the Deadpool cover. Oh, that's a beauty too. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're not real expensive, but if the Wolverine series is a hint, vampires and mutants are going to be intermingled.
Yeah, and I think the only one that really will kill you is the X-23.
But I want that. I don't have that one. I want one.
Yeah.
I've been too big of a tight ass. There was one on my comic shop forever, and I was like, I wish I knew what it really was. It was a raw copy, and I should have just pulled the trigger.
Those
shame on me.
Those books are beautiful. I'm going to show and again, this is I collect covers and I put them away, and these are books that I don't intend to sell usually. Some of them you can get cheap, and I want to talk about some maybe key artists who have done really beautiful portrayals. I always speak about that, right? Talk about one of the most underappreciated characters. First of all, Firestar. Come on, anyone who watched Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man Has Amazing Friends. So this is just a Stephanie Hans regular cover, beautiful cover, one of her best covers, early work. You can have this for a song. I'd look for a really nice copy of this. This is something that would look beautiful in a slab, right? Terry Dodson. Always been a big. Terry Dodson to me is sort of underappreciated. He's sort of I guess, seen as an Adam Hughes light. He's a little more expressive. Maybe if you took Kevin Maguire and Adam Hughes and put them into one. But just Terry Dodson covers, Magma covers, particularly, he's done these really great covers. I'm not sure proportionally how she would stand, but again, Dodson is another sort of practicer. And
however she wants, Gary. She's going to stand however she wants.
He's a great guy also. Another guy who's become a seminal X-artist, right? Mark Brooks. This was the Uncanny X-Men Special 1. This dealt a lot, I think, with Eva Bell, who was, if you remember Brian Michael Bendis, remember that guy for writing for the X books before he's been crapping the bed over at DC. He wrote this sort of story about this Eva Bell who was supposed to be one of the most influential mutants. She could pop through time. She's actually popped up as one of the 6 in Hickman's run as well. This was not her first appearance. She popped up early in one of those X-Men books I have to look for. But this was a 2-part storyline where she was jumping through history and had some scenes that could come back into play. Excalibur, my all-time favorite book. I had to when they came out with the Hidden Gems cover of the new Excalibur. This was
gorgeous.
The Alan Davis cover, and again, this stays in my collection. Greg Horn, right? Those Emma Frost covers.
Dude, talk about underappreciated. And I like the Mayhew Mystique covers that are even easier to find than those Emma Frost covers. You pull them out of dollar bins all day long.
And
I don't care if it's the one.
Brian K. Vaughan wrote that series, and it was a great series. It was
makes no sense to me. No one cares. But I think when shops reopen and those are ones to be thinking about for sure. Because again, you can pull them out of dollar bins. Similarly, if people are trying to unload stuff on eBay, want to sell sets of that for nothing in live auctions, grab them.
Yeah, you can
Grab
absolutely
them because they're awesome.
So someone who gets a lot of justifiable pushback because he tends to be like they call him a porn tracer, Greg Land. But Greg Land does have some nice covers out there. This Storm cover, this is Uncanny X-Men 449. I love that portrayal of Storm, and of course, this is a Phoenix Endsong series. There were some cool variants for that one as well, including, let's see if I have it here. Oh, this was actually following up the Endsong. So this was War Song with Emma Frost over there, right? This was an exclusive variant edition. I don't know, Top Cow put this out of all companies, right? That's a little weird variant from them. People have seen this cover, and I brought this up way back, I think, on my first show. Another beautiful Josh Middleton when he's working on his softer side, and we know he did that great. He's done a great run of covers for DC. But this X-Men Unlimited 47, getting up there a little more, getting a little more attention lately. Just so you don't think I'm just showing like female characters. Wolverine, I love the Wolverine 300 Adam Kubert cover. There's also a sketch variant of that one. This looks a lot like the David Finch one that's on the way. Emma Frost, one of my all-time favorite. The Carnageized. I didn't buy a lot of Carnageized versions, but this is Jay Anacleto doing that. Another White Queen, Art Adams, regular cover on the cheap. This is Astonishing X-Men 43. I don't know how this ended up in here, but this probably should have tied into earlier. Uncanny X-Men 157, just because people are watching Dark Phoenix now. They have nothing better to do. Maybe they'll be seeking out Dark Phoenix books online. We brought up that Morph character from Exiles before. Exiles, what an interesting book. Not really mutant driven per se, even though it has the X in there. Not I think down the line they started to switch away as they went into the next Exiles, which I'll talk about. But this was Exiles 1 and then Exiles 12, which introduced an all new like sort of Exiles as well. There are a lot of first appearances depending how you view characters from other planets popping in. Jenny Frison, that Phoenix Resurrection cover. One cover I love that I have not gotten my hands on is that that beautiful Phoenix Resurrection. I want to say the issue 3 variant, gorgeous cover with her like in purple coming out, and that artist hasn't done a lot of work, but I love that work. My all-time. So then we spoke a little bit about Kitty Pryde before. That Joe Chiodo. Chiodo does a lot of good girl art too. There's with Lockheed over there, right? It's sort of like we've seen him do some work on Spider Girls. You've seen these sex and violence covers for the mini, but this was very much in the spirit of that. A Mike Choi cover. This is the X-Force 9 cover that is almost copied exactly if you're looking for that. Cheap X-Men red cover. This, of course, is Jenny Frison. Travis Charest, one of my favorite artists, X Infernus number 4. I know everyone seeks out that other X Infernus cover with Magic, but I do love Travis Charest, one of the all-time great artists out there. More Terry Dotson, you can see he refined a little over time. That was his Emma Frost Black variant. Another Jenny Frison, the Extremist 2. That was a ratio variant. She does a lot of close-up profiles if you follow her Wonder Woman stuff. Another store variant I brought just because I like Addie Granov and I like the Virgin variant with Wolverine and X-23. This was a Legacy 1 variant cover. And a cover that I show, I think I'm contractually obligated to show my favorite triptych cover, and it ties into that Uncanny X-Men Kulan Gaff. And let's see if this is the right order or not. No, I probably did it backwards. But yeah, it should probably be this in the middle, I guess. But this Exiles run where they went up against Kulan Gaff, and again, I don't know if I can fit them all in there, but this was a triptych cover that should probably be arranged like that or something. Something down the line. And finally, character we'll never see again, and I always show her, but I just love I love that Apocalypse and the Extracts that cover, and people who follow me have seen this cover before if you haven't. But David Nakayama, again, one of the up and coming cover artists who's out there currently. I think that's all I have in terms of just quick covers to look at, Nico, as a quick run through, and then
you ready?
Yeah.
I can do stacks. I didn't know. I put together like a stack.
I'm gonna get coffee, Nico. Real quick. I'm gonna get coffee.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
I put together like a stack of Wolverine books. I think I don't know if they fall into Gary's category of too freaking obvious. or not, but just so we can run through them, we'll give it a try real quick. I love this. If you collected comics as a kid in the 90s, then you remember when this Mike Zeck cover was the cover. And depending on what iteration of Wolverine we get and what sort of time hop story we get, we may see this on the big screen. Whether we do or we don't, it's a classic cover for sure, and I'm a big fan. I like a ton of those books. I think this is one that's taken off in the last 2 years or so, year and a half. That's just kind of a no-brainer. You can pick them up kind of, reasonably inexpensive out of long boxes and slab them. The same is true with Uncanny X-Men 210, first appearance, 211, first appearance. Those are minor characters that appeared in that or appear in the book. I think we only got one issue of it. What's it called?
Mutant Massacre? The Mutant...
Yeah, the 211 and 210, they've got the Renegade X-Men characters. Jimmy did an article about the Marauder.
The Marauder, yeah, like the original Marauders before they reclaimed the name or whatever. Is that
regardless? Again, the Sabretooth stuff, it's they're just easy buys out of back issue bins. I think you want to focus on higher end copies. People love Wolverine, and there's a lot of just like underappreciated Wolverine covers. So this one's one of those. It's Jim Lee's first Wolverine. Nobody seems to care but me. Someday they will. If you remember in the 1990s, Uncanny X-Men 258 was like the book because it was when Jim Lee began that epic run. I think people are going to always have nostalgia about that issue and this Wolverine issue. That is young people's Wolverine. And the same is true for these books. I grab them on the cheap every chance I get. I don't care how many copies there are. Those are ones that are near and dear to people's heart. As far as just like straight Wolverine cover buys, I love the one that's the cover of the video game. It's Wolverine number 27. Gary,
yeah,
yeah, right,
in fact, I had it. I'm looking at my pile, and I had like some books I didn't show. I'm like, oh, I don't have time. And that, of course, the Mutant Massacre. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Same deal. Just a cover buy for Wolverine.
John Byrne. Talk about an artist who gets like crapped on for no reason.
None whatsoever. I think it's his personality. Actually,
yeah, that's totally what it is. But you know what? That's deserving from what I hear.
That's what I hear too. Another Wolverine cover I just love.
Yep.
Similar. Yeah. I don't know why. Big guns, blood and claws, Wolverine. Yep. Makes sense to me. I just buy them when I see them super cheap. Again, super. I think
Barry Windsor Smith.
Yes, Barry Windsor Smith original art is something I want. Barry Windsor Smith original. Wolverine original art. I have no shot of getting it, but it's like one of those life goals. I'd like to
get Bernie Wrightson. Get Bernie Wrightson on my night. That Bernie Wrightson is one for me, and Barry Windsor Smith. But Barry Windsor Smith, what in a he had that life death. One of the talking about X-Men storylines. If you're not familiar with, and I just wanted to go back a little and talk that. Why I think that Mutant Massacre is such an all-time great one. It was devastating for fans of like Kitty Pryde, like she couldn't move out of her phase state. We had Colossus was mortally wounded almost, and he had to be healed. That sprung off, if you remember, like those characters were taken off the board and then they popped back up in Excalibur, which Claremont did with Alan Davis. And I don't know if we spoke a little bit about it, but again, Inferno, to me, this 239, like Mr. Sinister. If you're not a Mr. Sinister fan and you haven't loved what they're doing with him they've made him such a flamboyant character. They've thrown in those little those diamond gossip pages as well. Matty Pryor, Matty Pryor, we just saw if you again, this is one of the last books that came out, but the Hellions book came out, which is which was a teen-rated title. The last page is Maddie Pryor about to launch off into Inferno again. So these books are going to be hot down the line. This whole series, I think it went from 239, I want to say, to 242, and there might have been a prologue as well, or maybe 243. I showed these, I think, when you, Mel, and I were together on. I have, some of those. What do you say? Some of the back of the Wolverines have sweet art. Yes, half price Cook. That is, you know what? And that's a sad part. Like, a lot of times I'm like, oh no, I'd love to show the back of books. Speaking of Wolverine, I also, you know who this is, by the way? You know who did this cover? Doesn't look like him, but
Jay Lee?
No, this is actually a Scotty Young cover.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, and I know Scotty Young has his collectors, not as well known, but it's sort of all the Wolverines that have appeared over in all these different forms, and he's sort of fighting them all. So yeah, I think
for people who've never done StreamYard before, right? The screen's about this big on my laptop. That's about this big. So there's like this little picture of you in there, and I'm always like, whenever you guys see me go like,
a picture and a picture and a picture, right?
Yeah, that's like me trying to dig in and be like, what is that? Who is that?
Now, I know, Nico, one thing I wanted to do, because I know I'm sort of, believe it or not, I haven't brought out my short boxes, and we're running out of time. But I did want to, if anyone's
I got more.
Just
let me know.
That's perfect. I just want to show. I thought it would be fun if we just gave out a few books. So speaking of Wolverine, yeah. I thought so. I'd like to mail in one package these 4 books. So this is a Simon Bianchi Wolverine number 50 autographed with that silver marker there. I also wanted to throw in one of the Jen Bartel X23 variants, which I always think is a really cool little variant. I love Jen Bartel's art. I've commissioned original stuff from her. And then if you're not an X-Men fan and you're interested in finding more out about the X-Men, if you haven't seen this series, I'll send you Ed Piskor's 1 and 2 of the X-Men Grand Design. This was a letterbox variant, which how can you not love that with all the X-Men lineups over the year? And then this is a really creepy, I call it the perv variant. Hello there, mind if I lick your ankle? And that, of course, is Mastermind, who we know was quite the deviant back in right around the Hellfire Club run. But if you don't know what these books look like, it's telling the story of the X-Men, like sort of written in this like old style, and they blast through entire runs of the X-Men and give you the whole history of the X-Men. So we're going to send this out. If you leave a comment and you tell us what you'd like to do us to do on a future show, a theme or a topic, we're going to randomly throw you out there, and then we'll contact you, and I'll send you these books in a little stack, and I'll fill up the box with some other things as well. I can get up to 10 books in there. So if send out the link, enjoy it. And now, Nico, back to you. I know you have some books you want to show.
I got some random nonsense. So on the list of I can't wait for our shops to open up again, right? Or conventions to open up again. One of the things that I don't want anybody to ever forget about what are these Marvel Tales covers. I flip and love them, dude. They're some of my all-time favorites. So McFarlane X-Men. Are you kidding me?
That's great.
For me, it doesn't get better than that, and they're gorgeous.
And people may not know about those. They may know, remember when they used to have X-Men Classics or Classic X-Men used to be the reprint book out. So a lot of people know that. They may not know that there were Marvel Tale runs that had the X-Men on them. Those are great. Yeah,
and in the generation of cover buys, and no one cares if it's a second or third or fourth print. Nobody opens the damn things anyway. I want the 4th print of Saga #1. I want Batman 1 5th print. It's purple. I want, whatever. These are a no-brainer for me.
Yep.
And they're super duper easy to find for absolutely nothing. And I think they are a winner for our part-time retailer show setter-upper guys like me. I buy multiple copies of the same damn books.
Yeah.
Because you can stick them in your long boxes, and either people love them because you've got gorgeous copies, and they're like, yeah, I'm trying to put a set of that together too. Or they're like, what the hell is that? And you mentioned the classic X-Men books. They're here too.
Oh,
Adam Hughes.
that's the Paul Smith. Paul. What was that? When Uncanny 173 maybe is a rip of that. I think.
Yep, Adam Hughes. After Paul Smith, you got him.
Yep. And Paul Smith, for me, as I've spoken about before, to me that's my seminal X-Men artist. He was the bridge between Byrne and J.R. Jr., who I love J.R. Jr.'s stuff too, and I know he's fallen off over the years, but. For me, in order, it's Paul Smith, J.R. Jr., Mark Silvestri, Jim Lee, Byrne, of course, being in there as well. I mean, so many great artists over the years. It's funny because McFarlane, I think, hasn't really done a whole lot in the X universe, right? When you think of those Image guys, Rob Liefeld was the guy who was always the mutant guy, and McFarlane was the Spidey guy.
Yeah. So now, Gary, I want you to tell me what this book is.
Okay, so that is Uncanny X-Men 467. Oh, wait a minute. Look at this. Wow.
What's going on there? Because it's the toy.
So not for resale. Wow, Acts of Vengeance. Yeah, so tell me about this. I don't know. It's some of these.
Well, we know who this. We know who drew this, right?
That's Chris Bachalo, right? Is that? Yeah, right.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I think that there's opportunities for that book. One, because one appears in a toy, and two, because it's just super sweet. I like the variants like that. I think they're tough to find. You can pull them out of dollar bins. That's the kind of stuff, if you're a guy like me that you're looking for. I mean, I guess we could go on forever and ever, but you want to give any parting shots and parting thoughts?
Yeah, let me do. You know what? Let me do one last quick. I have one small stack left, and
Sweet.
Just again, these are cheap buys, things you can pick up at the end. So Claremont was sort of forced off the X-Men, depending who you speak to. But eventually Marvel gave him a run down the line of this X-Men Forever book. So sort of where he had left off in the X-Men, what would have happened next. Great little series to check out. Tom Grummett, who did a nice Titans run on there. That's a book to look out for. We speak about alternate versions of mutants and how they could pop up into these worlds again, depending on who's involved. So Gen X one was this series also again by Claremont, who kept going back to his same sandbox. A book I didn't talk about before, but a really underrated book that was sort of this Mutant X. This is the annual one where you have the Goblin Queen strike. She was a major villain in this, going up against Havoc. Was in another world and ended up. Actually, this is where Bloodstorm, who was actually killed off later, appeared in this Mutant X series as well. I've also spoken about the What If Magic books, and obviously everyone loves the character of Magic, but I think again Jeff Deckel cover on this side, and then one of the action figure versions on the other side. And I think John Tyler Christopher, right? So this was where Magic took on the sort of the cape of the Sorcerer Supreme. And I think we are seeing a lot of things going on with that, especially with her popping up in Strange Academy and different places. I think this is a cool book to be holding on to. I've spoken about X-Men Noir. This was actually the true first appearance of the Noir universe. Spider-Man Noir just came back again. If you look in the dates, X-Men Noir predated the Spider-Man Noir. So this is actually first appearance of the Noir universe, if Marvel ever pops in there. For some reason, like really minor characters again, but they popped up in Hickman's run. 214 is I think Lady Sinister. I wanted to think that was Lady Mastermind, but it's Lady Sinister's first. And a really weird character. In this one, you have Bling show up. Not Blink, but Bling. She's been in the... in one of the X-Force books, maybe. I forget which one, but she's hanging out with like Laura and Psylocke. That character in the middle, actually, by the way, turns out to be Mystique. Spoiler alert. Trinary, character I really thought was interesting. This X-Men Red run. If you're not a Tom Taylor fan, like Tom Taylor does some really great work. Suicide Squad right now is my favorite DC book. But this was a fun lineup, and this character, first appearance, Trinary, pops up in there as well. We see the really awful Iron Man 2020 book out there. But one thing that I was looking forward to that we now won't see was they were going to do a Weapon X series, Weapon EXE, like Weapon Execute. And then they switched and decided to focus on Albert and LCD from the Wolverine series. But they popped this Weapon X popped up in Marvel Comics Presents #9, and then later we actually saw this cover, and then there was a second print variant, which was their sort of first appearance of that sort of online X-Men. Children of the Vault, they just popped up again the other day. This X-Men 188, right, by the Mike Carey run. Again, Chris Bacalo, you notice he keeps circling around. Very famous X-artist. So this was a sketch variant for that. First Children of the Vault. X-Force 116, Ecstatics, really quirky, out there group that by the great Mike Allred and the very weird Peter Milligan. If you follow his stuff on Shade the Changing Man. Out there writer, but this was a really fun concept, and most of the team dies in their first appearance. And finally, I showed this briefly last time. We spoke about this Captain Britain 8, and I know that that this was
oh baby, wait a sec, hold on. I was trying to make that even bigger than it was. Yeah, come on. Oh yeah. Lord, have mercy.
This is 9.2 Captain Britain 8. This is the first Betsy Braddock. This is not her first appearance as Captain Britain. That came in issue 10. But what I thought was really cool was, we saw those characters sort of split apart. I've spoken about this cover in the past. This again is Terry Dodson. This Mr. Why I like this, it's a variant, and this is where you actually split Quanon and Psylocke. So Betsy becomes her regular self again, Quanon becomes her regular self, and they both become major parts of what's going on in the X books right now. But I also looked, and I was looking through my old Uncanny X-Force Remender run, and apparently Betsy was Captain Britain in that book as well, and there she is riding a dragon. And there she is front and center on that cover there, right? So this was a Remender run as well down the line. So I think that's pretty much all I have, Nico. I went through my stack. I didn't go deep down into my Uncanny books over here because I figured people know those enough, and who knows what the future will bring, maybe. But this was fun. How long did we go? Yeah, hour and 45 minutes.
Hour and 40 minutes. It was a real good time, man.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed myself. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Apparently, I'll just give out books next week since Gary took this week.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out, he explained how the hell to do that. Do you want to explain one more time how to enter the contest?
So if you're watching, you don't have to be watching live. You can watch this within our next, as we set up for our next show. If you give us just a suggestion on a big topic you'd like us to cover, obviously Nico and I will have to look through our stock and see if we can actually talk about it. I do have a huge Star Wars box as well, but that's delving into deep geek territory, Nico. So
I'll just let you talk and ask questions. That stuff.
No, I don't. Then I might as well save that for my solo show. But maybe
I get really confused with Star Wars.
Spider-Verse might be fun to explore again.
I can handle that.
Yeah. So, but we want to look at what you want to hear more about. And we, this is a nice format. I like this morning show. It lets me get the rest of my day done, and I don't wake up hungover. And Half Price Cook, I love that already. We introduced X-Men and Fantastic Four. Last comment, I saw that the rumor out is that Ant-Man 3 will have a Sue Storm appearance. Again, from Jeremy Conrad and MCU Eternal. He's, he tends to be a little hit or miss.
He hits though.
But I say there's like a human centipede of comic rumor sites out there on Twitter, and they pick up everyone else's sort of thing.
Right. So it looks like there's independent sources.
Screen Rant is the best of it because Screen Rant will pick up rumors from some of these like really, you picked that up from Bleeding Fool? Not even Bleeding Cool, the real Bleeding Fool, which is a real thing. But they're saying Sue Storm could be backdoor appearance into Ant-Man 3. So maybe you have her as a scientist or someone in the background who interacting with Hank Pym, and you're like, oh wait, there's a nice Easter egg just starting to set the tone. So we may see that pop up more and more, especially when they have to compress some of these things coming out down the line. So one thing I will not talk about, I have no knowledge of the Eternals, so if that's going to be a comment, scrap it. So that's more you, Nico. You cover that on Comic Book Speculation.
Yeah, we can do it.
I saw the Funko came out, right? The Funko spoiler list, and I'm like, I still don't know any more than I knew before. I see there's a Celestial in there. I'm supposed to get excited about that? No, not really. There's Celestials.
It's also very confusing. I just pray that they do for the Eternals what they did for Groot and Rocket.
And not the Inhumans. Not what they did for the Inhumans.
Well, that was Marvel TV.
I know. But now, Nico, They're interchangeable. You're right, but now don't you think that pretty much, like I've said again and again, I think they're interchangeable. You'll introduce characters in one place, you'll slide them into the movies, back to TV.
Well, no, I mean the people that ran Marvel TV into the ground.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the creative, juices are flowing there on the big screen and on the small screen now in a way that they weren't with S.W.O.R.D. I wasn't a fan. I thought it was kind of rinky-dink.
Right.
So, I don't even acknowledge that Inhumans was a thing. I wish they'd take it off of Disney streaming and we could all just pretend like it doesn't exist, sort of like those racist Disney cartoons. Just leave them in the vault for no one to ever see.
Put a disclaimer in front of it. Put a disclaimer and say this was back when no one knew what the hell to do with these characters like they do on those cartoons.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah. All right, Nico. Well, this was great. I love the format. It's about right under 2 hours we kept it, and I hope everybody out there is staying safe and you get to enjoy your day as much as you can. All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye, guys.